Hello everyone, and welcome to my Young and the Restless official 24 channel. The moment Lily Winters stepped back into Kane Ashby's world, she believed she was choosing peace, stability, and a future rebuilt from the ashes of past mistakes, but fate had other plans, and it would unravel everything in a single, horrifying chain reaction that began with lust and ended with blood. What Lily didn't know, what she couldn't possibly have imagined as she sat laughing gently with Tracy Abbott over dinner at Society, was that her life was already spiraling toward a nightmare that would brand her marriage, her family, and her very soul forever. Tracy, ever the voice of warmth and encouragement, gently nudged Lily to allow herself happiness again, insisting that Kane had changed, that forgiveness could heal them both, and that the twins deserved parents who chose love over suspicion. Lily smiled, nodded, and tried to believe it, even as a faint unease lingered in her chest, a whisper of instinct she pushed away. While Lily was convincing herself that trust was a gift worth giving, Kane Ashby was sitting in his office playing with fire, and Phyllis Summers was the match. Phyllis arrived unannounced, bold as ever, carrying a puzzle cube wrapped like a harmless Christmas present but loaded with implication, manipulation, and temptation. She claimed regret, swore she'd made a mistake walking away, and stood there with metaphorical hat in hand, eyes blazing with familiar hunger, not just for Kane, but for power. Kane assumed Victor Newman had double-crossed her, that her grand plot had collapsed, but Phyllis surprised him by admitting she was ready to team up again, ready to burn the world down beside him if he'd let her. As she spoke, her words dripped with promises of revenge, money, and control, insisting she planned to steal back the AI program Victor had taken and use it to seize Newman Enterprises itself. She painted a future where she and Kane ruled together, untouchable, unstoppable, and when she called him Aristotle, Kane bristled, insisting that man was buried, but Phyllis wasn't listening. She wanted Aristotle unleashed. She wanted him dangerous. She leaned closer, invaded his space, her voice low and intoxicating as she dared him to take over the world with her, and before Kane could fully stop himself, before reason or loyalty could intervene, their lips met. That was the exact second Lily Winters appeared in the doorway. The image burned itself into her memory instantly. Phyllis bent over Kane, Kane's hands frozen but not pushing her away, betrayal framed like a living photograph, and Lily's heart shattered on impact. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply stood there, absorbing the truth that trust had once again made her a fool. Phyllis spun around, startled, already calculating her escape, while Kane stumbled to his feet, stammering explanations that sounded hollow even to himself. Lily didn't wait to hear them. She turned and walked out, her world collapsing silently behind her. But the scandal was only just beginning. Across town, danger was escalating fast. Noah Newman, groggy and disoriented, regained consciousness in the park where he'd been brutally knocked out, panic flooding him as he realized Sienna Bacall was gone. He immediately called Nick and Sharon Newman, his voice shaking as he explained he'd been attacked before Sienna was kidnapped. They rushed to meet at Crimson Lights, where fear turned to fury when Nick suggested, recklessly and cruelly, that Sienna might have knocked Noah out herself and gone willingly with Matt Clark, aka Mitch Bacall. The accusation nearly led to blows as Noah snapped back, insisting Sienna would never betray him like that. Before the argument could spiral further, Matt himself called from a seedy motel room, taunting Noah, savoring his power, and proving just how unhinged he truly was. Noah begged him to let Sienna go, even offering himself in her place, while Sharon unleashed venomous threats over the phone, promising Matt would pay for every second of terror he inflicted. Matt laughed, and hung up. The room fell silent, dread settling in thick waves. After a brief but heated bicker, Nick convinced Noah they couldn't wait, couldn't react emotionally, they had to force Matt's hand before Sienna was lost forever. Nick called Matt back, his tone calm, calculated, and chilling, insisting he wanted to make a deal. Meanwhile, at the Abbott mansion, Diane Jenkins Abbott was glued to her phone, texting Michael Baldwin relentlessly for updates, desperate for anything that could help them survive the storm brewing around Victor Newman. As Diane reflected on finally finding acceptance within the Abbott family, Tracy reminded her that survival often required strength, not submission, and hugged her tightly, unaware that chaos was ripping through Genoa City faster than anyone could stop it. Back at Kane's office, the fallout from Lily's discovery detonated when Lily returned, armed not just with heartbreak but with a gun she barely remembered picking up, her emotions spiraling out of control as Phyllis tried to flee the building, heels clicking frantically down the hallway. Words were shouted, accusations screamed, years of pain unleashed in seconds, and when Lily raised the weapon, she wasn't aiming to kill, she was aiming to end the betrayal. But fate twisted cruelly. Kane lunged between them just as the shot rang out. The bullet meant for Lily's rage tore into Kane instead. He collapsed instantly, blood spreading across his shirt as Lily screamed his name, horror replacing fury in a heartbeat. Phyllis froze, eyes wide, then bolted, fleeing the scene, the building, and the consequences she'd helped create. Sirens wailed in the distance as Lily dropped to her knees beside Kane, sobbing, begging him to stay alive, her hands slick with his blood, her world irrevocably destroyed. The adulterous kiss had ignited a chain of events that could never be undone. Kane's life hung in the balance, Lily's soul was shattered by guilt, Phyllis was on the run, and Genoa City stood on the brink of scandal, violence, and irreversible fallout that would scar everyone involved forever. Adultery scandal, Kane takes Lily's bullet, Phyllis flees. Lily spies Kane and Phyllis's makeout session, Nick's deal with Matt. While Nick Newman proposes a deal with Matt Clark, also known as Mitch Bacall, Lily Winters will observe the makeout session between Kane Ashby and Phyllis Summers. After Noah Newman regains consciousness and gets up in the park, he'll call Nick and Sharon Newman with the news that he was knocked out before Sienna Bacall was kidnapped. Nick will annoy Noah at Crimson Lights by suggesting that Sienna might have knocked Noah out and gone with Matt willingly. Noah will meet Sharon and Nick at Crimson Lights. Matt will make some snarky calls to Noah from his hotel room, but Noah will force him to let Sienna go and take him instead. Sharon will bark threats over the phone before Matt hangs up. After Noah bickers with Nick briefly, Nick will convince him that they need to force Matt's hand now to keep Sienna safe. That'll lead to Nick calling Matt back and insisting he wants to offer him a deal. Lily and Tracy Abbott will eat together at Society. Tracy will encourage Lily to allow herself to be happy with Kane because it will be better for her and the twins. Later, Tracy will catch up with Diane Jenkins Abbott at the Abbott Mansion, where Diane will be texting Michael Baldwin for updates on whether he's found something that can help them. After Diane reflects on finding acceptance with the Abbott clan, Tracy will suggest that Diane may be the fighter their family needs and will give her a hug. Phyllis will arrive at Kane's office on Tuesday with a puzzle cube as a Christmas present. Phyllis will also claim she regrets walking away from Kane and that she's there with her hat in her hand. Kane will assume that Victor Newman's double-crossing of Phyllis caused the plot to fail. Phyllis will acknowledge that she's ready to team up again and will work to convince Kane that it's a good idea. Kane will eventually get curious enough to ask what the plan is, so Phyllis will insist she's going to steal back the AI program from Victor. Phyllis will think they should take over Newman Enterprises together so they can get payback, money, and power. He won't accept it when Phyllis refers to Kane as Aristotle. Phyllis, on the other hand, will force Kane to let Aristotle play before she forces him to take over the world together. Phyllis will lean over Kane as he sits in his office chair, so they'll be kissing when Lily pops up in the doorway and witnesses the close moment. The echo of the gunshot still rang through the corridors long after Phyllis Summers disappeared into the night, her flight leaving behind nothing but chaos, blood, and a scandal that would detonate across Genoa City with nuclear force. Lily Winters remained frozen on the floor beside Kane Ashby, her hands trembling as she pressed against his wound, whispering his name over and over as if repetition alone could keep him alive. Kane's eyes fluttered, his breath shallow, pain etched across his face as crimson seeped through Lily's fingers, each second stretching into agony while sirens wailed closer and closer. When the paramedics burst in, Lily was gently but firmly pulled away, her knees buckling as reality crashed down on her. She hadn't just witnessed betrayal, she had nearly killed the man she loved. Kane was rushed into emergency surgery, doctors shouting orders as Lily stood outside the operating room in shock, her clothes stained with blood that felt heavier than lead. News traveled fast, and within minutes Nick Newman arrived at the hospital, phone still clutched in his hand from his last call with Matt Clark, his face hardening as he took in the sight of Lily broken in a chair, Sharon rushing to comfort her while the gravity of what had happened settled in. Nick's deal with Matt was still hanging in the balance, but suddenly everything felt more urgent, more dangerous, because chaos bred chaos, and Matt thrived in it. As Lily replayed the moment over and over in her mind, the kiss, the confrontation, the gun, Kane stepping in front of her, guilt threatened to suffocate her. She confessed everything to Sharon through sobs, admitting she never meant to pull the trigger, that rage and heartbreak had blurred into something unrecognizable. Sharon, torn between compassion and concern, urged Lily to focus on Kane surviving first, warning her that the legal consequences would come soon enough. And they did. Detectives arrived, questions followed, and Lily's fragile composure shattered further as she was forced to recount every detail, her voice cracking when she admitted the bullet had been meant for Phyllis. Meanwhile, across town, Phyllis hid in a dim motel room, breath ragged, hands shaking as she replayed Kane collapsing in front of her. For a fleeting moment, fear flickered into something like remorse, but it didn't last. Survival mode took over, and Phyllis began plotting her next move, convinced Victor Newman would pin everything on her if she stayed visible. She burned her phone, packed a bag, and swore to herself she'd return stronger, because Phyllis Summers never stayed down for long. At the hospital, time dragged mercilessly until the surgeon finally emerged, announcing Kane was alive, but critical. The bullet had narrowly missed his heart, but complications loomed, and the next 24 hours would determine everything. Lily collapsed in relief and terror, clinging to the edge of the doctor's words, knowing survival didn't mean forgiveness. When Kane was finally transferred to recovery, Lily was allowed to see him briefly. He was pale, unconscious, machines beeping steadily, and as Lily held his hand, she broke completely, apologizing through tears for doubting him, for letting anger consume her, for becoming the very thing she'd always feared. Across the room, Nick watched silently, his jaw clenched as his phone buzzed again, Matt Clark calling back. Nick stepped outside, his voice icy as he finalized the deal, promising Matt protection and leverage in exchange for Sienna's safe return. But Nick had no intention of honoring it fully. This was a chess match now, and Matt had underestimated how far a Newman would go. Matt, emboldened, taunted Nick with details about Sienna's fear, igniting a fury Nick barely contained, but the deal was set in motion, law enforcement alerted, and a trap carefully laid. Back inside, Noah arrived, eyes red, guilt crushing him as he blamed himself for everything spiraling out of control. When he learned Kane had been shot, Noah froze, the realization hitting him that violence was spreading outward from Matt like poison. Sharon urged Noah to stay strong, reminding him Sienna was counting on them. Hours later, police tracked Matt's location, and in a tense standoff outside the motel, Sienna was rescued, shaken but alive. Matt was arrested, screaming threats as he was dragged away, swearing Genoa City would regret crossing him. Relief swept through the Newman family, but celebration was muted by the news from the hospital. Kane's condition had taken a sudden downturn. Lily rushed back to his bedside as doctors scrambled, warning her that internal bleeding had worsened. Kane briefly regained consciousness, just long enough to lock eyes with Lily and whisper her name, his fingers tightening weakly around hers. In that moment, forgiveness hovered unspoken between them, fragile, incomplete, but real. And then he slipped back under. As dawn broke over Genoa City, the fallout spread like wildfire. Word of the adulterous scandal leaked, whispers turning into headlines, and Lily knew her life would never be the same. Phyllis was officially declared a person of interest and a fugitive. Victor Newman began maneuvering behind the scenes, and alliances shifted as everyone prepared for the next war. By the time the sun rose fully, one truth was clear: the kiss had been the spark, the bullet the explosion, and nothing, absolutely nothing, would ever return to the way it was before. The night stretched endlessly as if Genoa City itself refused to let the darkness lift, and inside the hospital, time seemed suspended in a cruel limbo where every beep of a monitor felt like a verdict waiting to be delivered. Lily Winters sat rigid beside Kane Ashby's bed, her eyes never leaving his chest as it rose and fell with mechanical assistance, each breath borrowed rather than owned. The doctors had stabilized him again, but the word critical still hovered over everything like a storm cloud, and Lily couldn't escape the knowledge that her finger on that trigger had rewritten their lives forever. She replayed the moment relentlessly, the way Phyllis's face had twisted in panic, The way Kane had moved without thinking, choosing to protect even as his world was collapsing. Outside the room, whispers multiplied. Nurses exchanged looks. Security tightened. The scandal was already leaking beyond the hospital walls, and it wouldn't be long before the truth exploded across Genoa City. Nick Newman paced the hallway, phone glued to his ear as he coordinated with contacts, his mind split between relief that Sienna Bacall was safe and fury that violence continued to spread unchecked. Sharon stayed close to Noah, who sat slumped in a chair, guilt etched deep into his expression. Though Sienna had been rescued, the trauma lingered, and Noah blamed himself for trusting the wrong people, for not protecting her sooner, for letting Matt Clark's madness infect everyone around him. When Sienna finally arrived at the hospital, wrapped in a blanket and escorted by officers, Noah broke down, pulling her into his arms as if afraid she might vanish again. Their reunion was tearful, fragile, and incomplete, because survival didn't erase fear, and the shadows Matt had cast would linger long after his arrest. Meanwhile, across state lines, Phyllis Summers watched the sunrise from behind the curtains of a cheap roadside motel, her reflection staring back at her like a stranger. She told herself she hadn't pulled the trigger. She told herself she hadn't forced Lily's hand. But the image of Kane collapsing replayed again and again, cracking the armor she'd worn her entire life. For the first time in a long while, Phyllis wasn't sure how to spin this into a win. She knew Victor Newman would move quickly, using the chaos to bury her completely, and the thought ignited both terror and defiance. Phyllis began drafting messages she didn't send, rehearsing lies she might need, and plotting exits that could keep her one step ahead. Back at the hospital, detectives returned with harder questions, pressing Lily on motive, intent, and whether the shooting was truly accidental. Lily answered numbly, her voice hollow as she admitted the truth, that rage and heartbreak had blurred into something dangerous. The weight of potential charges loomed heavy, but for Lily, nothing mattered more than Kane surviving. When Kane finally stirred again hours later, the room seemed to hold its breath. His eyes opened slowly, confusion flickering as pain registered, and when he saw Lily, emotion surged through him. He didn't speak at first. He simply squeezed her hand, a silent acknowledgement that cut deeper than any accusation. Lily broke down again, apologizing over and over, promising she would spend the rest of her life making this right if he survived. Kane, weak but lucid, whispered that Phyllis was gone, that Lily needed to protect herself now, not him. The irony was unbearable, Kane worrying about Lily even as he lay broken because of her. News of the shooting reached society, crimson lights, and the Newman ranch within hours, conversation stopping mid-sentence as shock rippled through every circle. Victor Newman listened carefully as reports came in, his expression unreadable, already calculating how the scandal could be leveraged. To Victor, chaos was opportunity, and Phyllis's disappearance only sweetened the pot. Diane Jenkins Abbott watched the coverage with unease, realizing the lines between personal betrayal and corporate warfare had blurred completely. Michael Baldwin warned her quietly that this situation could explode legally and publicly, and Diane knew the Abbott family would soon be dragged into the fallout whether they liked it or not. At the same time, social media ignited, speculation running rampant as leaked details painted Lily as both victim and villain, Kane as both hero and betrayer, and Phyllis as the invisible catalyst who set everything ablaze. By mid-morning, reporters camped outside the hospital, shouting questions Lily refused to answer as security escorted her through back corridors. Inside, tensions escalated when doctors revealed Kane would need another surgery, his condition unstable and unpredictable. Lily was forced to confront the possibility that Kane might not wake up again, that their last real moment together had been poisoned by betrayal and violence. She confided in Sharon, admitting that even if Kane survived, their marriage might not. Trust had been shattered too deeply, and forgiveness, if it came, would be a long, painful road. Sharon listened, torn between sympathy and realism, reminding Lily that healing wasn't linear and that survival alone didn't guarantee peace. Across town, Noah struggled with his own demons, replaying Matt's taunts and the helplessness he'd felt when Sienna was taken. Though Matt was behind bars, the damage he'd done continued to reverberate, infecting relationships and fueling fear. Nick tried to reassure his son, but Noah snapped back, accusing Nick of always assuming the worst about others, a trait that nearly cost Sienna her life. Their argument echoed with unresolved resentment, proof that even victories came with scars. As night fell again, Lily stood alone in the hospital chapel, grappling with the reality that one impulsive moment had redefined her forever. She prayed not just for Kane's life, but for clarity, for strength, for a way forward that didn't involve losing herself completely. Somewhere on the road, Phyllis drove aimlessly, radio off, thoughts loud, knowing she couldn't run forever. She considered turning back, considered facing the wreckage she'd helped create, but fear won. Survival always won. And so Genoa City braced itself, because the adulterous scandal had only reached its midpoint. Kane's fate remained uncertain, Lily's future hung by a thread, Phyllis was still at large, and every alliance, every family, every carefully guarded secret stood poised to collapse next. The following morning arrived with no sense of relief, only a deeper heaviness that pressed down on everyone touched by the scandal, as if Genoa City itself understood that the worst consequences were still unfolding. In the ICU, Kane Ashby remained suspended between worlds, sedated and monitored as doctors debated their next move, his body bearing the cost of choices made by others and himself alike. Lily Winters barely left his side, refusing food, refusing rest, clinging to the rhythm of the machines as though they were the only proof he was still there. Every time a nurse entered the room, Lily's heart lurched, bracing for words she wasn't ready to hear.